What does it mean to work in IT? People ask me that all the time. My mom, my friends, even my boss. Basically, I make things at work work. I defeat the bad guys, the real bad guys, the super nasty, evil bad guys, and then I deal with the serious trouble. Yeah, they're not all idiots. Just kidding, they're all idiots. And if you're in IT, they will bring their problems to you. They will lose things, forget things, delete things, and ruin whatever's left. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong twice a day. Everyone's looking at you and you don't get to look at anyone else. You cancel your appointments, skip lunch, and fix it. Because if you don't, well, over here's your office, over here is total anarchy, and in between, you. 5 minutes without Wi-Fi and your coworkers will gut each other. You are everything to these people. A mother, a priest, a surgeon, a straight-up genius who knows the difference between this and that. The reason this won't work, but this will. And how to explain to the marketing guy what a recursive function is. Yeah. Basically, it means, well, never mind. This isn't a job for a human. You need to be superhuman, a two-headed genius, a three-headed genius, a detective, a general, an absolute saint with 7 arms, 26 hands, and the heart of a lion. And inside that heart, the heart of an eagle. And inside that, everyone's passwords, because they will never remember them. You are the defender of data, the thwarter of hackers, the reviver of dead laptops. You are the chosen one. And at some unholy hour, you finally straggle home like a wounded sailor washed ashore. And your kids, they'll take your face in their wee hands and they'll say, "Papa, the printer's not working." And you'll fix the freaking printer because you work in IT. And because of you, things work.
Good morning. Hopefully we have everyone's attention.
Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Douglas Holbert, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, Creating a Safe and Secure IT Infrastructure. Today I'm joined by Sophos Senior Sales Engineer Scott Roberts. Scott is on the line. And then we also have Brandon Shallis and Cooper Comstock on our side. Scott will be covering some issues that are commonly seen in the modern workplace and how you can work to defend against them and ultimately how to prevent them. As introduced and discussed in our in-person meetup a few weeks ago, and by the way, our meetup is the first of a 3-part series each quarter that we put on a specific topic that we choose, just based on feedback and some of the things that we're hearing around with our customers and other engineers and IT people in the industry. So we reviewed what everyone, what they're doing today as far as security, how they're doing it, the pros, cons, efficiencies, inefficiencies, as well as best practices, and then I guess what it ultimately comes down to is needs and wants in our day-to-day operations. We received some really good feedback and had really good discussions in that meetup. It was, a pretty interactive meeting, and everyone that joined us had great things to say about it. They had some really good stories, some funny, some rather serious and thought-provoking, but all in all, it was really good, and we tried to take all that into consideration to tailor today's webinar to it and cover the majority of those hot topics and the feedback that we got. So hopefully you guys will find this beneficial, and it's informational, educational for you. And then if anyone has any other questions, please let us know. If we missed anything, please let us know, and we'll try and incorporate that. Before we begin, we need to take care of a few housekeeping items. If you're unable to see anything in your screen or hear us properly, please take the time now and let us know in the chat.
Yeah, I think we're all good, guys. Should I take that as our cue to move on?
Yeah, Scott, we just wanted to remind everyone that today, we want all these, the meetups, the webinars, and then the lunch and learns to be as interactive as possible. So we're not just talking at people, but with them and taking their pains and their experiences into consideration. So please, any questions that anyone has any time during the presentation, chime in, just ask it through the chat in the presentation. There will also be an opportunity at the end of the presentation for Q&A. Scott's pretty good about taking all that into consideration, and he's also able to view the chat screen there too. So we'll be addressing some of your questions both during the presentation and after we conclude, so be sure to stick around at the end. And then this will all be recorded as well, and we can distribute it as needed. So one last note, the webinar concludes our events for 2019, but in 2020 we have a whole list of events and ideas that we're putting together. So give us any feedback or thoughts that you have on future events to take any of that stuff into consideration. We're more than happy to put something together for you, either in one of these meetings and events, or individually if we need to come out to you or do a conference with you individually. So as mentioned earlier, the quarterly 3-part series will include a meetup, webinar, and lunch and learn. The 3 are beneficial, and they sort of ramp up throughout the process. The meetup is relatively informal. It's everyone kind of giving their general feedback and ideas, and we'll bring up a topic, and somebody will remember a story. And that's what I mentioned earlier. Some of these stories are thought-provoking. Some of them are kind of funny, and some of them are kind of a backlash of some bad days that I'm sure all the IT people on the call can recall. So then the webinar is what we're putting on today. The webinar gets a little bit more detailed. That's where we bring in a vendor, and today it's Scott Roberts with Sophos and their team. This is where we do kind of a deep dive on the product and services that they have to offer that can solve a lot of the pain points and solutions that we've talked about. And then the lunch and learn is where we bring everybody out again and get even more so into detail and start to apply it to those individual scenarios. So more information on those upcoming events will be coming out here soon. So to help you get acquainted with us, we'd like to provide a quick background on ourselves. So like I previously stated, I'm Doug Holbert, president here at Integrated IT Group. We're a managed service provider, including data, systems, telecom, network, and security, amongst many others. We can fit in with a number of, or in a number of ways. So we customize the way that we deliver to you based on what you need. So we are the IT department for a lot of our customers. We supplement IT departments in others, whether that's the help desk, the low-level stuff where we kind of take the overflow. We are also project management solutions architects and lead virtual CIO in other scenarios, and then help desk and a ticketing service for others where their IT department, they only use us for overflow. So we fit it in a variety of different ways. We're also a partner, and we bring IT solutions to you and act as an integral part of your team. So we do like to work with points of contact and decision makers to integrate and become part of your company, so to say, and deliver what you need, and work with you to make sure that your users are having a good experience. So. And then lastly, we're the trusted advisor. That's part of what this series is educating you on what's available, what it can do for you, how it can make your day better, easier, more efficient, by putting the right tools and bits and pieces in place. In today's IT, just what's the word I'm looking for? Just the way that IT is today, there's a lot to do and very little time to do it. So we're looking for efficiencies. We're looking for, centralized management and all that to help make everyone's lives easier and more efficient. So I think that's enough. I don't want to continue rambling on here. We got a lot to cover today, so I'll hand it over to Scott.
Hey again, good morning, everyone. Doug, thank you for the intro. My name is Scott Roberts. I've been been part of the Sophos team for a little over 2 years at this point, but in the industry, 25, with the bulk of that as a integrator and as a consultant. So, I mean, I'm not just a sales guy, quote unquote. I've done more than my share of weekend migrations and 3 a.m. emergencies and all that junk. So I like to think I've probably worn most of your shoes at one point or another. So, but anyway, again, we do appreciate your time this morning. We know there's a lot of things you can be doing, and, we appreciate the, little subset of that you're handing off to us this morning. And hopefully, we can, teach you a few things along the way and, make that investment of yours worthwhile. So, just a quick understanding of Sophos, for those of you who are not aware of who we are. Sophos is a security manufacturer. We've been playing in this space for, kind of the inception of this whole industry, founded in 1985. We've been doing this a very long time. We're active in pretty much, every country in the world that, I guess we can move intellectual property around in, you guys understand what that looks like. But yeah, we've been playing in this space a very, very long time. So we've seen pretty much the origins of everything out there and, the different methodologies that have went into trying to, build a better mousetrap along the way. We deal with some of the largest organizations out there, we all the way from, these big ships scaling down all the way down to, SMB as well. So it's a very, very broad portfolio. A quick snapshot, we continue to win awards over and over in, our product categories. This slide is the, that kudos slide for, predominantly our endpoint products. That is kind of the core of our operations at this point. So anything that you guys are kind of looking at out there, you're going to find Sophos to be, a leader in these spaces. Another component that we'll touch on briefly today is also our firewall. And this is also a product that, if you know who we are in this space, you're a big fan of our firewalls. Some of you out there have never been aware of it, but just, so that's understood. This is an area that we play very, very solidly in as well. So, hopefully at this point, I'm not sounding like this guy, so my goal is to not preach to you today and whatever, but to actually kind of teach you some stuff along the way. Us in the industry, we have to do a better job of kind of separating out the noise and, not just always be 100%, hey, here's my basket of goodies that I'd like you all to, subscribe to, but to take more time and better help you guys grow as individuals in this space. And that's one of my core objectives today, is to kind of talk through, what we're seeing changing out there, so that can start to correlate with what you're seeing and how you can start making better decisions on, how to shore up your security posture and better serve the organizations that you're responsible for. So what I like to talk about is kind of like the IT security challenge. It's broad. And this is one of my favorite slides because it speaks well to just all of the different areas of IT security just by itself. And I'm kind of betting that most of you, this is hardly the only hat that you wear. IT security has just become a huge emphasis, but it's hardly the only thing that you're responsible for from an IT operations perspective. And, last but not least, actually trying to build an organization and serve the productivity and profitability of it. So joking around, I'm always saying that, this is kind of another iteration of the same slide, which it basically is. As Doug was saying in his intro, we all have way too much to do. We're all overwhelmed. We don't know what to do. We know we have to figure out ways of tackling these problems, but we're not sure how to do it. how do we simplify some of this stuff that we're dealing with? So that's kind of Sophos's whole mandate in what we're doing, in how we're trying to build our product set out in a way that, you know, not only checks all those boxes that you have to, but also does it in a way that really streamlines a lot of the management or awareness that you have to have. And you'll hear us talk about this model that we have called synchronized security. Bottom line, what it is you're taking what was traditionally individual point solutions, whether that be endpoint or your firewalls or your email gateways, or even so much as like your wireless access points. And instead of having to babysit that all independently as different solution sets, the goal is to bring it together more into an ecosystem that operates more as a team. So if we can build these components in a way that share data, that simplifies your management or simplifies what you're having to look at or be aware of, that's gonna be our goal in everything we do. And I'll show you just a kind of a quick, you know, pull together. If we look at just a couple of key components, you know, we all have endpoints, we all have firewalls. How could we make that better? How can we streamline some of the junk that you have that you're looking at in your consoles? And how can we make that a little bit more efficient? So a quick intro here.
Hi, I'm Doug from the product team here at Sophos, and today we're going to be taking a look at a synchronized security use case. Here at Sophos, we found that, on average, 43% of network traffic flowing through a firewall is unclassified, leaving you blind to which apps are using up your bandwidth. With synchronized security, Sophos products share information, enabling you to see all the apps and processes using up your bandwidth, including malicious ones that might be hiding inside the network traffic. We call this particular feature synchronized application control. It's also useful for classifying any custom apps that might need prioritization. So in this use case, we want to see which unclassified apps and processes might be using up our bandwidth, and the synchronized security products required to do so are XG Firewall and the Intercept X endpoint product, or XG Firewall and the Intercept X for server product. Synchronized application control can be found in the central synchronization section of the left-hand navigation menu. By default, synchronized application control is turned on, but you can toggle it on and off manually if you like in the middle box here. Once that's turned on, it'll kick in automatically if you've registered your XG Firewall with Sophos Central, which you can do in the main box up here if you haven't already. So once we've made sure the feature is active, there are a couple of ways to see unclassified apps and processes. In the right-hand column of the XG Firewall Control Center screen, there's a synchronized application control widget that we can use to click directly through to the data. We can also click the Applications link in the left-hand navigation and then choose the Synchronized Application Control tab. So we see our new apps here, and it looks like the Windows Photos app is currently unclassified. Selecting all applications from the drop-down filtering menu here will surface the rest of our apps. Now back to the Windows Photos app. If we click on its name, we'll get a pop-up menu that lets us classify it manually. We can choose one of several categories, and then whichever category we select will make that application subject to all the same rules as all the other apps in that category. So let's leave this app as a general business app, which again will mean it's treated however we've set up our policies to treat general business apps. Click Apply, and we're all set. We can see full reporting on unclassified apps and processes by clicking the Reports link in the left-hand nav and then choosing the Applications and Web tab.
So, I mean, that's just an example of some of the things that we're changing with, you know, what, again, are traditionally different point solutions. So the example that was demonstrated there is how can we start to better share that data that exists on an endpoint already with that network layer in your environment, hence your firewall. So instead of telling your firewall to solve all of this stuff on its own, tear that traffic apart and put it back together, why not just start sharing that information that the endpoint already has, exponentially simplifying what you're having to do on your firewall just to be aware of what that traffic looks like. So that's just an example. So, but I guess moving on a little bit, the goal today is to kind of talk about, kind of that evolving threat landscape and what we in this space is seeing. And as you can see from my little mini tagline, hint, no, it's not really getting any better, and nobody's really expecting it to do so. So some examples here, Sophos Labs, the core behind our operations that's responsible for analyzing, the big ugly threat flow of all the junk we see out in the wild. We're seeing on average somewhere between 450,000 new malware instances per day. And the differentiator there is that 75% of it, we're only seeing one time. And that's an odd statistic. What does that mean in reality? As you'll see as we go through here, the evolution of malware itself is becoming very, very dynamic, and it's becoming very, very targeted. So, and this is why you're seeing things change with traditional endpoints where you hear things like signatures don't matter the way they once did, and you have to start really looking at the behavior of things and being able to do that. Well, this is why, because it's really, really hard to write a signature for something that you're only seeing one time. To get a signature defines something that's very, very specific. Well, if your malware is now evolving dynamically on its own to, disguise payloads or take advantage of new things or move things around so that it's undetected, writing signatures for that is extraordinarily ineffective. That model just doesn't work the way it once did. So we have to find a better way of moving through that. Another statistic that's actually scary, 53% of organizations have been hit by ransomware. This is actually a little dated, okay? What we're seeing out there is that it's probably significantly larger. Or we're seeing a very significant amount of organizations that are dealing with attempted ransomware incidents as well. Where being on this side of the equation, we get the feedback from clients that are also running our product saying, hey, this blew up in our environment, but, thank goodness we were doing what we were doing because we didn't have any problems behind it. And the second statistic on here is a third of all ransomware incidents, people are paying the ransom. And I added those questions.
Sorry, Scott. I just wanted to interject there a little bit. So we just recently took over a client. It was actually a referral to us from a friend of mine. The CEO reached out and said, hey, you guys do IT, right? I said, yeah. So we went in there and found out that they had been cryptoed. So they have a kind of siloed security solution that this resolves or fixes, where they have, Malware Bytes Enterprise or something on the endpoints, and then they have a Juniper firewall, and then they have, name the different products that you have in all the different security pieces. And upon talking with them, going in and looking through everything that they have, their firewall had logs of activity, their antivirus had logs of activity, their web filter had logs of activity, but nothing was talking to each other, and so it didn't do anything, and they got cryptoed. Their IT guy brought in the backup solution, connected it, started remediating it and restoring the data, and because the backups were connected and he hadn't actually closed the hole that they got in through the first time, it got encrypted again. And so now even their backups are encrypted. So they're working with forensics teams now. So I think they're in like $35,000 to $40,000 worth of ransom that they have paid. They're a high-level government contractor, and I'll leave it at that. So it's a scary thing, but they've paid the money, and every time they communicate with them, they're like, okay, we'll decrypt a couple of files. Now give me another $5,000, and I'll do the rest, because there's no legal relationship. There's no agreement that that the money is actually going to get anything done. It's all by chance. So interesting statistics here, because we're dealing with it currently, and the company is in a bad way right now. So we're helping resolve it, and we've already talked about the whole Sophos solution, and they're on board with it. So
And Doug, you're 100% right. We on the other side of it, we see this, oh gosh, I'd almost say every day. And, this number of, a third paid the ransom. Guys, I honestly think that's very, very statistically low. I think that's a metric based on who is kind of reporting having to do that. The bulk of situations that I've been involved in where end users and organizations have been disrupted by ransomware to this degree, they all pay it. They don't have any choice. They don't have any choice. And that's the only way they're going to get it back, especially if their backups, as Doug was saying, have also been compromised by this. It's staggering. And the numbers we're seeing, which we'll get into from a little bit from a ransomware perspective, it's crazy the amount of money people are being forced to pay just to try to put things back together. Just quickly, the metrics continue to evolve. This is not something we're seeing slow down in any way. These exploitable methodologies are very much being taken advantage of. It's been discovered that it's very profitable. So, what we're seeing from a threat actor perspective, it's growing like crazy. I don't see anything stopping until we find some way. There's got to be some methods of better locking this stuff down, but that is definitely a ways away. So we need to do a better job of understanding how that stuff's happening. So what we're seeing in the field right now is that 53% of all crime is digital. So that is how profitable that, just that this aspect, the whole cybersecurity landscape has become. That, over 50% of all crime worldwide is now digital, with closing in on $3 billion last year. And this is based on, FBI statistics, where these metrics are coming from, of damage that's been done. So digging in a little bit, of how that stuff is changing. What are the differences? What is evolving that is making these metrics, so dangerous to deal with? So, bottom line, our attack surface has evolved significantly. Everyone's carrying something around. Everyone's using multiple devices. You can barely function in society anymore, without obviously using, some sort of, or having some sort of digital footprint. So the attack surface is just profound. And, it's just easy to take advantage of. If you don't know what you're looking at, you make this assumption that everything is fine. Well, it's just not. And, how we're seeing this stuff evolve out there is pretty crazy. And just, a couple of top level methodologies that we're seeing, really, really profound ways of, just infiltrating an organization or stealing data or, just, compromising you as an individual. And the reality of it is kind of how we as individuals look at things. When you're dealing with digital crime or digital whatever, it's not in your face. You don't get it. I'm always saying that if you know how the motor is put together, you know how to take it apart. So if you simplify it in something like that you can see, it's really not magic. The guys who do this from a threat actor perspective just very much understand how this stuff is put together. So how do you reverse engineer it? How do you take it apart? It's extremely straightforward. So many of these techniques you can do yourselves. So the toolkits that have been built out there to significantly streamline what these threat actors are able to use, it has basically just become a full black market business model where I guess basically, certain countries and international laws, trying to track these bad actors down and shut down these rogue organizations is nowhere near as easy as one would think it would be. It's extremely easy to hide your identity. It's extremely easy to make it seem like whatever you're doing is coming from somewhere else. I love all the junk on the news where it's like, hey, North Korea did this or Russia did that. In reality, probably not. It's very, very easy for me to launch whatever I want to do by pushing my traffic through Eastern Europe if I want to. So what does it look like all that stuff originates from? Eastern Europe somewhere. It's not complicated. These are toolkits that are easily downloadable, and there's nothing you as an individual have to maintain on there in order to continue to use those footprints to do that. The techniques are extraordinarily well understood. Lots of different ways to take advantage of things that are out there. Poorly written applications that are just kind of sitting there where it's really, really easy to take malware and inject that into kind of the empty space of code and, a poorly written application, or even maybe not necessarily not so much, just airspace that's in an application where this approved application that you have running in your ecosystem is now doing other things because it's allowed to run. And it's not shooting up flares anymore. It's not about pop-ups and whatever else and dragging your computer performance to a crawl. It's about exfilling data. It's about using that device as a remote access device, or to, create a lateral movement host that can move around inside your ecosystem now that it's on the other side of your layered security and your trusted barrier. Lots of different ways to go about doing this. All of these different toolkits are exactly that. They're toolkits. Most of your threat actors out there, they're not building any of this stuff. They're taking advantage of things that you guys all yourselves can pretty much download in 15 minutes and start to monkey around with if you want to take the time to better understand what that looks like. These toolkits that are available, there's, again, very little limit to what you can utilize them for and start to take advantage of. And then when we start to get into just the co-op capabilities of what some of these things may look like. So Emotet as an example, all right? Emotet is a platform that originated as kind of its own malware subset, okay? Well, the idea came about, it's like, okay, well, Emotet is a phenomenal delivery mechanism, so let's start renting our service out so that we can start taking advantage or start to use these other high-profile, malware payloads and start renting our Emotet botnet out so that other malware distributors can utilize that platform we built out to, deliver their payloads. Say it's, Amazon Web Services for, bad guys, whatever, same game. And you would think it would just be simple to shut this stuff down. It's not. I mean, it's a big, ugly world with international law, with all kinds of stuff going on. Any of you that have ever been involved in a localized, legal issue can attest that, just how ridiculous and how long it takes to even get some of the most basic stuff resolved from a litigation perspective in our society. Now, when you start to incorporate in, just all of the international law and countries that just don't care and everything that goes along with that, it's not going to change. I mean, unless you're specifically targeting something ultra high profile that is impactful to the government, seeing this stuff change anytime soon is actually going to be pretty slim. And what we're seeing from a remediation perspective, as Doug was starting to talk about, what people are paying is absolutely profound. I'm seeing six-figure ransoms for very, very small organizations. Six-figure ransoms for maybe 30 user networks. What do you do? So what choice do you have? Your entire organization is locked up. Do you start from scratch? Could you start from scratch? What would be the cost if everything inside your organization was suddenly encrypted Monday morning? What would you pay to put Humpty Dumpty back together? More than you probably realize. It's shocking to me what we have seen people do. And the insurance companies, in a lot of ways, are actually making it worse. So as we've seen, kind of like these techniques evolve, and it's made it so much easier for these threat actors to do their thing. It's made it very, very simple for just organizations to, they don't really have any choice in the matter as far as how they try to recover from that. And, so what are we, on the other side of this industry kind of seeing as one of the core delivery mechanisms and root causes of the whole idea? Okay, so we have that human nature component. So much of it is originating this way. If you're not filtering your email, if you're not paying attention to how you have it hosted, if you're not using two-factor authentication of some sort inside your ecosystem to double verify that your end user is who they say they are, and this also scales to like Office 365. So many infections with Office 365. You have to find ways to double ensure that the people accessing O365 are who they say they are. So many issues where mailboxes are getting compromised and threat actors are just sitting out there waiting to see something that looks juicy to flow through there. The president of an organization's got, email correspondence going on with somebody that controls a checkbook somewhere. All right, so just interject in the middle of that conversation a little bit, and suddenly you've got a trusted party on one side of there saying, oh, okay, we're changing the topic and moving on to something else. And oh, by the way, oh gosh, I guess something didn't get paid. I need to, get that payment issued to them. And they just do it only to find out that, it wasn't the president or the chief financial officer of that organization at all. So Annie, I see your question there. I will actually, I'll address that here in just a second. My slides are just a wee bit out of order and I'm just a wee bit long-winded. So, but yeah, I'll address that specifically here in a second. So what we end up seeing is, just a kind of that human nature component coming into play. All right. What we quantify as risk, you start to put things into perspective, the things that we kind of take for granted, email, we make this assumption that everyone out there is just kind of good. Okay. And then we always have these interesting conversations that, okay, well, have a safe flight, right? That's one of the first things that everybody says to somebody when, their loved one is taken off. Statistically, you are more likely to die from a vending machine in the airport getting pushed over and falling on you than you are in an airplane. It is one of the safest things we do in our society, oddly, for being 30,000 feet in the air. So it's like what we perceive as risk is something that we're having to do to better change. We have to change that conversation a little bit. So I guess what I'm circling back around here a little bit is email again being that example. This is why, fish testing your organizations is so important. It's not that anybody did anything wrong. It's that if we need to do a better job of training our user populations on how to be more self-aware of things, because something lands in your inbox, so many people just make that assumption, hey, it's fine. It's here, IT did their thing, whatever, yeah, sure, click on this link. Oh gosh, my CFO's out of town and he's at some trade show and he needs to do a raffle and, he forgot to buy his Apple gift card. So he wants me to go out and buy 100 Apple gift cards and scratch those off and send him the codes so he can hand them out. Kind of sounds ridiculous. Happens all the time. We had an example of exactly that a few months back. Lady in Philadelphia, somehow got into a conversation with who she thought was, her CFO inside her organization. He literally told her, go out and get me 100 Apple gift cards. She could only find like 70 of them. Went all over Philadelphia and got these things from Giant Eagles or whatever and reported back. It's like, I'm sorry, I can only find 70. He threatened to fire her unless she drove all the way to Harrisburg and found the rest of them. The bad guy threatened to fire her. So it's that human nature reaction to things. So yeah, she sent him 100 gift card codes for, the Apple Store or whatever it was exactly. Until on the other side of it, they realized it was indeed a scam. But you and I thinking about this, you think, well, there's no way I'd fall for that. We see people fall for this all the time. And the fallout of it is profound. So yes, better training your user populations on how to deal with, what looks like legitimate email is huge. And the fundamentals behind that are actually pretty simple. I mean, if we would all take the time to just do, I don't know, hey guys, here's a company memo and these 5 things we will never ask you to do. We will never ask you to wire money somewhere. We will never ask you to do some unorthodox methodology of, scratching off gift cards and emailing to me. Worst case scenario, if anything ever seems odd, just come ask me. Just some basic training inside of our organizations go a very, very long way. So skipping over a few of these, you're not going to care, exactly what this stuff looks like and how it detonates. But any of this stuff that you guys ever want to get into, working with Integrated IT's team, they can take you through all of this. They can always bring, us, Sophos, back into the conversation, or for anybody that wants to really dig deep into how this stuff works. But, for the sake of everyone's time and, answering, questions a little bit more directly, I want to get into, just talking specifically about how that landscape's changing a little bit more and what you guys can be doing to better shore up what that stuff looks like. So, we all obviously have, that ransomware question in our mind. How do we stop that? How do we better lock up our ecosystems to prevent, this from being what shows up on your computer on Monday morning, which we see every week, unfortunately. So, I mean, there's products out there, us being one of them, that very much streamlines and simplifies being able to monitor that behavior. And Annie, directly to your question, this is what we're dealing with. So the insurance companies themselves are actually becoming part of the problem. Because it's easier for them it would actually cost them less to just pay the ransom than it is to try to put a compromised organization back together. They're just paying the ransoms. And that is fueling the insurance premiums, obviously driving that up a little bit, okay? And it's also ultimately cheaper for insurance companies to just do that. And organizations are pushing for it because their goal is to obviously get back up and running as quickly as possible. So that's
Yeah. I can back that. So I'm actually getting requests on a regular basis right now to answer insurance compliance surveys for companies, and it's a growing trend right now. So we answer as part of their IT department, and as we're responsible for the execution of security and all that. The insurance companies where you have that cyber attack insurance or the data protection insurance to help you recover from ransomware and crypto and all that. They want to know, how you're encrypted. Obviously, the insurance companies, they don't necessarily want to pay out, but they want the policy. So you run through a survey and it asks, do you have this? Do you have that? And it's amazing how much it's no, 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 no. And then we know exactly what we need to do. So the insurance surveys sometimes become a checklist of things that they need to do before they can even be covered. So.
Yeah, very, very much so. So they're in a way part of the problem, not part of the solution. But how do you solve that? I mean, what the insurance companies suddenly say, hey, we're not going to deal with terrorists, quote unquote, right? Well, you as the policyholder is going to say, I don't really care. You're going to do whatever you have to do because you're obligated by my policy with you to whatever. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So how do we start to do a better job of just making sure that you guys as end users are not in that situation in the first place? And that's where this kind of conversation came from, where we need to start looking at our toolkits and thinking through, okay, is this really the best option for us? How do we better streamline just our awareness of what may be happening? How do we take all this logging that we may be doing and maybe restructure it in a way where it's not just a bunch of unusable noise? Okay, I've checked that box and okay, I'm compliant and PCI this and HIPAA that. I'm logging all this stuff, but what do you do with it? It's overload, as we were talking about, kind of the origin of this conversation. And there's so many other areas. Credential theft, huge. Okay, everyone wants to have that password conversation. Use different passwords on everything. Change your passwords every so often. That conversation all by itself is even changing. The whole idea of changing your passwords every 30 to 90 days in itself is being rethought on whether or not that's effective. Because if your password has not been compromised, does it really make any sense to change it? So now we're starting to introduce laziness into that equation. So even that old conversation that we've been having for so long is starting to be rethought of on whether or not that even makes a lot of sense. And, that's something that, Doug and his team, are seeing a lot of, and they're able to help you guys work to kind of shore up, or modernize your methodologies of how you're even dealing with your users. This in itself is, again, huge. 2.2 billion stolen passwords at any given time, 30% of the world's population. And then when you factor in, all the third world stuff and whatever, users that don't have the luxury of, living in the United States and, first world nations and stuff, I mean, that becomes an extraordinarily large percentage of people that may actually be online. Now, I take advantage of that stuff, and I just use, again, those toolkits that I have out there that have been kindly written for me, where I can take that data and I can just plug it into whatever. And, we can throw rocks at every possible account you have out there without me having to do much at all.
We actually deployed a local copy of this, so that way we weren't, punching credentials in and actually sharing it with somebody unintentionally, because I don't know what the back end of this thing looks like. But we put in some passwords that were like, they're known and not known, but I mean they look to be strong passwords. And when you put them into a password field, the password field says, yeah, this is strong, this is good. And we put it in here, and 1,500 cases of it, known, because this will actually give you statistics on like how many times it's been hacked or listed in a database somewhere. So it was very eye-opening, even when we put in some of our like really strong passwords. And every service, every portal that we do is two-factor locked, and we use 20 plus character string passwords, per NIST recommendations and all that. And some of those we even put in here, not the strings of characters, but like the passwords that are, I am the administrator of 2019, ! 1009, whatever, in a whole string of characters. Those are known, it's the phrases and all that kind of stuff. It's very surprising to see what's actually known in here and has already been compromised.
It's staggering. And I find this humorous. So, all right, throw little metrics up here, move around here a little bit. So, all right, 8 billion pwned or owned password accounts out there. What are the statistics of how many people are actually on Earth? Huh, that's interesting. So we have more accounts that have been compromised than people that actually exist on Earth right now. That's
So
how.
One point to this, and this is humorous to me, but pwned came up the other day in a conversation with my parents, and I was just talking about it as if everyone in the world knows what pwned means. So pwned is a gamer's mistyped owned, OWNED, for like I owned you, or it's kind of talking trash to another game player, but it's commonly mistyped as pwned. So I just want to make sure everyone understood that means owned. My parents had no idea, and they just looked at me sideways like, what are you talking about, and why do you keep using this pwned word?
Yeah, it's just become one of those slang terms in our industry. So, but yeah, I mean, the humor factor there, I mean, it just kind of points out just how widespread static password databases and how they've been compromised. That's why things like two-factor are so important. Everything that you're using online, set up your two-factor accounts. If it has anything to do with your personal data, and that's Facebook, that's Instagram, that's Twitter, that's LinkedIn, not to mention your bank account and anything else that could actually do big damage to your personal life very quickly, set up two-factor. Work with Doug's team to understand the best ways of going about doing that. Certainly make sure your user populations that you're responsible for are using it with Office 365 and anything else that links itself to, data that is potentially intellectual property. It's not hard to do anymore, guys. You have to do this. If I could pick one thing in our industry that I would want people to do, it would be two-factor authentication. It's just very much remedies a very easy moving target in our industry. How malware is changing, okay? This is kind of the next evolution of what's happening, all right? So we're all aware of what ransomware is. Something pops up, my whatever's been encrypted, it's a bad day, now I got to pay a bad guy to, pretend like he's doing me a favor to unlock it, okay? What we're seeing a lot of now is what we classify as lateral movement, where this malware, same thing, is now being utilized to sit inside of your ecosystem and just exfil data out, okay? And now that data itself is showing up other places, and you're being ransomed from that perspective. So now you're being forced to, pay money, to get things from that perspective. So anyway, how do things start to change? One of the things that, Sophos has done, and this operates as an extension of, Doug's team and, our partners that invest in, building out toolkits to better help the end users that they are responsible for deal with this. So Sophos has introduced what we call managed threat response. And the idea behind it is to take, that toolkit that we've built for you, that is built around all of the different methodologies that we are utilizing to, just stop a threat actor, the closest to that delivery, that entry point inside your ecosystem as we can. So, I mean, that toolkit, that the InterceptX toolkit and that Sophos endpoint toolkit is the core of what this is. But what does that change into now that we start to incorporate, what is classified as managed detection and response? The idea is to basically give you an option where all of that data that you have localized inside your organization is now something that is also linked to Sophos directly, where you can start to utilize our teams to manage this for you. The Sophos teams, the integrated IT teams can take ownership of this for you instead of you guys having to wear this hat and try to keep up with everything that is changing in the landscape, let us do it. So we've built out a platform that is dynamically just doing most of this stuff for you. And anything that does happen, we can actually take action against. Some of these traditional products out there, you're getting alerts saying, hey, looks like there's something going on over here, but by the time you have the ability to do something with it, the quarterback's down. You've been compromised over a weekend or whatever the case may be. Let Doug's team, let Sophos' team start to take ownership of this stuff for you, where we can actually become actionable on your behalf. Do those health checks, make sure your policies are where they're supposed to be, make sure all the feature sets that are supposed to be turned on are turned on and, set up properly. Let us help you do that. That way, when something does happen, we can immediately operate on your behalf. And, when things aren't actually going on, or there's not actually, a flare in the air or whatever, we can actually proactively start to do that threat hunting for you. This is an area that no one has time to do. What this is where you're actually looking inside your organization, right? Because we all have time for that, and digging through things that don't necessarily make any sense. First and foremost, we're doing it from an automated perspective with the tools that we're building out for you. Second thing is when we see those incidents that, we're classifying as a, lead generated, something shot up a flare that we need to dig a little bit more into, we're doing that. Thirdly, what we call leadless, we're even doing, those threat investigations and that proactive stuff inside of your environment that hasn't even necessarily generated any noise. So it's a full-blown security operations center as a service that we are offering out, where we can help you guys and just develop that comfort level on knowing that there's an Overwatch in play where you've got something that you don't necessarily have to be the line in the sand for everything. And how you structure that is up to you. What level of interaction you want from us is up to you. How do you want us to play together? Do you want us to just notify you Monday through Friday, but yet maybe on Saturday and Sunday when you don't care, or you're hoping not to care? Do you completely want us to just automate the whole process? There's a lot of different ways we can build this out to help you. But guys, I know we're right up against the clock, and I want to make sure that, we do have a couple of minutes for questions for anybody that may have them. And again, any of the stuff can be taken offline, and we're willing to talk with everybody directly, get specifically into their use cases or their needs. So anyway, I'll shut up and let Doug talk so we can address some questions.
No problem. And we can go back in and continue to answer questions. I just want to be respectful of all of the attendees' times, and make sure that anyone that has a hard out at 11 can get out and do that. If any of those people have questions, comments, concerns, whatever, please send that over to us, and we'll address it, whether here or directly with you. For those that have other questions and have a few minutes to hang around, we're more than happy to give you the extra time if we need it. I think I got a little bit long-winded at the beginning and truncated Scott's time. So if there's anything that we can do or help or offer or send to anyone, please let us know. But yeah, so let's take a look at the questions here. Scott, so maybe you might be able to answer this. It says, what or when does it make sense to notify authorities, aka the FBI, when you identify early level infections, something contained to a workstation or two, or even just a breached mailbox? Do they even care if there's no tangible loss?
That actually kind of comes down to, you're going to have, depending on what industry you're in, first and foremost, you're going to have laws that conform to you on what with private sector, public sector, healthcare, patient data, third-party data that you may be collecting on behalf of people that pay you or whatever. So that determination is kind of all spelled out with, those governing bodies on what your requirements are. I can tell you there's probably not, as many people reporting as should be. Okay. And if you're a privately held organization, you know, those rules of engagement are different. You know, that's something I would, your board or whoever is kind of running your organization, first and foremost, will make that decision if you fall into the private sector. But, you know, I mean, and, you know, any business attorney that you have, that you work with, would probably be better to address that question. There's a lot of yes, you have to, no, you don't, and then there's definitely that in between of should you. But if you're dealing with other people's data, that's kind of the kicker right there. Other people's data has been potentially compromised. You pretty much have to legally report it right out of the gate, because you cannot put them in a situation where, you know, their data is potentially being compromised by somebody else because you didn't tell them about it.
Yeah, agreed 100%, and that's typically our approach as well. So we are familiar. I won't say that we're experts, but we are familiar, and we do work with compliance officers. But if you are an organization who has compliance requirements, we take all that into consideration, and it, you know, runs the gamut. You got PCI, HIPAA, ITAR, you name it. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of different compliance requirements or compliance vehicles, and then the requirements within them. So it kind of depends on where you sit in where you sit with customers' data. If you store their data, if you have access to their data. So this is where, you know, for example, us as a managed services provider, we have a lot of access to systems and data and all that. So although we aren't, I mean, for insurance purposes and all that, but we specifically in our company is not required to be ITAR or HIPAA or anything like that. We, in some cases, we do have to be an agent for those other companies, but as far as a named entity being required to be compliant, we are not, although we do have access to all of the data. So we are more compliant than them just by proximity and access. But yeah, working with clients that, you know, again, across the gamut, that, you know, have HIPAA or PCI or ITAR. Brandon, what are the other? I'm trying to come up all the other acronym compliance. It depends on where you sit, the level of compliance that you have to have, and all that. I know, at least in those organizations, they do have something outlined in terms of when they need to report it, how they report it, and who it gets reported to. If you're a private company, you don't have any compliance. It's more of a trust factor, an ethical thing. You should be notifying somebody if you've been compromised, just to get out in front of it. You know, if you don't notify them and their data has been compromised and they continue their day-to-day without taking any action as far as locking down accounts or notifying their clients or customers, I mean, it can have a ripple effect and really take off really quick. And that's why, you know, I mean, the government's been stepping in and finding some of these organizations a lot. I mean, billions of dollars if they find out that, you know, somebody like, you know, a big box store, retail giant, you know, gets compromised, and then they don't inform the public of it for 6 months or 9 months. They try to keep it under wraps. That's no longer acceptable, because now each one of those people have been exposed for that length of time, and it's unnecessary. You know, so people could have been taking steps a long time ago before it crawled and you know, became a much bigger issue. So we can help with that. Not necessarily notifying you know, your contacts and everything, but as far as compliance and what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and then working with Sophos and this suite of solutions gets ahead of it even more, because now you don't necessarily have to be completely compromised before you know about it. That's the whole point of tying all the bits and pieces together, is to know ahead of time when there's just little activity on the front end. As I had mentioned, one of the clients that we're working with now, there's activity logged in every security component that they have, but nobody was looking at it, and it wasn't tied together to make sense. they don't have an IT guy. It was somebody that was just coming in on a every other week or every other month basis and taking a look at things, and it happened in between those times. So that's really where this fits in, is it collects all that information, it looks at it, it watches it, it analyzes it, and now we're to the point where there's actually people in front of it as well. So it's not just notifications and alerts, there's a team behind it that's looking at this information, and you know, it's not just a red flag that pops up on your computer. We're getting phone calls saying, hey, this customer has some very suspicious activity, we should get ahead of this. So let's see, any other, I think there's a couple of other questions that I think we might be able to answer more direct. Did we answer, has everything you've been discussing been about InterceptX? So all this ties into InterceptX. InterceptX is kind of the full suite of products and how everything ties together. It's like kind of the center point of everything. All the products talk to each other and give information back, and that's kind of the concept of InterceptX. Is you have your endpoint, you have your intermediate flow checks and balances, and then you have your edge, and now, you know, well, not now, but also cloud security if you have anything hosted, that all tie back together, and it gives you that information, and then that kicks off the EDR, MTR, all the acronyms over there as far as the response detection and remediation and all that. So
correct. You know, that the core component, you know, behind our ability to create awareness of all of the different insertion methodologies inside your organization is all built around InterceptX. And that's kind of what I'm showing up here. I mean, it is a very layered endpoint, just like your security is endpoint. The whole architecture behind it is very layered by itself, where we are watching all of those exploitable methodologies, that behavior, the classic stuff that we can do from a signature perspective, all the way out to very specifically built, you know, engines that respond directly to actions. Some things actually, believe it or not, I mean, you can't always tell if something's good or bad just by inspecting it, because what you're inspecting itself is benign until maybe it gets a command and control update, or it actually starts to do something that is determined to be malicious. Up to that point, there's fundamentally nothing wrong with it until it starts encrypting your hard drive. And that's where, you know, core engines like our CryptoGuard engine kick into play to actually stop that behavior. And, you know, make a long story short, it rolls back even those encrypted files out of a secure encrypted cache that we have that's specific to the engine. So it's a very, very thorough endpoint. So long-winded, yes, but yes. And that hopefully that answers your question. The core, you know, is built around InterceptX. Yeah,
Scott, do you have the slide? I've seen it several times, and it helped me initially when Intercept was introduced. I kind of understand it a little bit better. The infinity sign, or the infinity symbol, where it's got all the products looping around it with the X in the middle.
Yeah, I do.
I don't know if you have that quick enough to be able to put it up here. If not, we can always drop that into the either recording or the follow-up emails that we send out to everybody.
Yeah, I definitely have that. So you're referring to kind of right out of the gate. Oh gosh, where is it? All the way back here. We had it up right at the beginning. And I promise you I have it out here. There we go. So you want this guy, right, Doug?
Yes. So, Ann, if you're still on, if you look at the middle of that is an X. So you have the infinity sign there. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but the intent there is that it loops through all the bits and pieces of security in all your systems and all of the checks and balances that you could potentially have a security issue with, or where something could be compromised, or an injection point, anything. And all of those bullet points going around there, UTM, next-gen firewall, wireless, web, email, endpoint, mobile, server, all of those are those critical points where we need to keep an eye on. And then you got user training, which is obviously, you know, making sure that even though we have all these security products in place, a lot of times user initiated things, because that user is giving it explicit, you know, instruction to, yes, go ahead and execute, is important. It all comes together and you have analytics and threat intelligence. So it's analyzing everything that's happening amongst all those different products. You see on the lower left, you have the appliance, and then the lower right, you have the endpoints. It just ties everything together. And then there's also, Sophos also has Cloud Optics. That's the top middle, Cloud Optics and Sophos Central. Sophos Central is where all this data gets delivered back to and analyzed, a management portal. And then the Sophos Cloud Optics is if you have anything hosted out on the cloud. There's a secure, I guess, gateway tunnel analytics that attaches to those connections to, you know, an AWS or Google, any hosting platform out there to make sure, you know, a lot of people think when you host things that you can just forget about security because it's in somebody else's infrastructure and it's a data center, you know, they're redundant. Okay, well, they're redundant, but they don't necessarily have your best interest in mind as far as security goes and what your users are doing to get connected to them. Their infrastructure is secured as far as behind a lock and key in a building that has fire suppression and security systems and access control systems and all that. But as far as where your data sits and how it's connected to the internet, that's open. You can pay for those services additionally, but again, a lot of times that goes unnoticed or I guess assumed. So hopefully that explains a little bit more how this all ties back into InterceptX and the full suite of products. And that's why I mean, this is under one roof. So Sophos does all of this, and their security company, they have you know, security engineers that deal with this stuff on a regular basis. So while Integrated IT Group is watching security and doing security things, we just simply, I mean, we have experience as far as what we've been in front of in the training that we received, but I mean, it's as far as, you know, watching the logs and analyzing all the things that are going on, because there's thousands of events a day that are happening. So that's where it's best to leave it to the experts. And we're now to the point where it makes sense to, it's kind of like, you know, spam filtering, you know, back in the day. And I say back in the day, a couple of years ago or prior to that, spam filtering was left to, you know, network administrators to manage and maintain everything, because email, you weren't receiving, you know, 100, 1,000 emails a day. You're receiving 5 or 10. I'm talking early 2000s and prior, but so it was okay to have a spam engine built out locally on your servers and just have your network administrator take a look at it every other week or something and fine tune some definitions and everything. Now it's an attack vector. Like, people know that email, you know, people live out of their email. It's your task list, it's your to-do, it's how you communicate, it's how you give direction, it's how you approve things and execute on things. It's a much bigger, it plays a much bigger role in day-to-day business now. So it just makes sense to leave the spam filtering to the experts. So you run it through a proxy out on the cloud where you have those experts and those know-all people about that. Let them manage that and watch over it. We're now at a point where data is so important. I mean, you see everyone doing it, Amazon and Google and all these other companies and everything. That's what they survive off of is user data. Well, hackers know that data is very valuable, and so we have to do more to stay ahead of that and protect that data. So that's the reason why we have to look at each point in somebody's system or network where there could be access to that data, where somebody could, you know, jump through a hoop and gain access to it, and take all that into consideration, tie it all together, and have some analytics run on it. So hopefully that was helpful and not more confusing. I tend to get kind of passionate about this kind of stuff just because it is so important. I don't think it is very well understood, you know, across the industry as far as what businesses are doing to protect themselves. So anyway, I don't think there's any other questions here. Anybody else have anything? I don't see anything listed here. as far as in the panel. I have a few emails and a couple of side notes that we'll handle offline. But otherwise, thanks for joining us. I know a few people have dropped offline already. This has been recorded, so we will have that recording available for distribution if anyone wants it or wants to recap something. Myself and my team, Integrated IT Group, are available for questions, direct correspondence, as well as Scott and his team. We can bring them in if needed. So please let us know if you have any other questions, concerns, comments, anything. Otherwise, thanks again for joining us, and we hope that today was beneficial for you. Thank you.